Hello and welcome to Language of the Soul podcast. I'm your host, Dominic Domingo.
And I'm your co-host, Virginia Grenier.
We'd like to invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy some inspiring conversation. Here at Language of the Soul, we know that life is story. Individually, we're the products of the stories we tell about ourselves. Culture is the amalgamation of the stories we weave about the human condition. Here's the thing. Individually and collectively, we can write our own story. Thanks for tuning in and joining in the march toward human potential. Hi, guys, and welcome to Language of the Soul podcast, where life is story. Our regular listeners will know we've taken a little bit of a break. We had to, unfortunately, take a break for the first time in 3 years. I won't we could spend the entire episode going into what we've been up to, but in my case, it was a move, and we all know logistically moving is a lot. But preceding that was a buyout agreement, so a little complicated, a lot of late night phone calls with my lawyer and stuff like that. So I just had to take a break. And Virginia, she can speak for herself, but I believe was getting her licensure as a therapist, which is a lot. You were finishing up your program and getting your licensure. I'm not inviting you in yet. Okay. But anyway, it was just, it broke my heart, but it was a necessary break. And I miss it. I'm going to be honest. We've talked about the ways in which it serves us. And it's not therapy per se, but it's the type of conversation we're having. I just love doing this, and it inspires me and keeps me going. So I've missed it, and Virginia can speak for herself. But when I invite her in, she's very patiently waiting in the green room. I just wanted to remind viewers, you may recall, we were kind of motoring through the different chapters of the book that inspired this podcast. So Language of the Soul, the book, we finally went back and started addressing the chapters in the book by having roundtable discussions about the content with our favorite talking heads or former guests. So we're resuming that, and we're only up to chapter 3. We've had some pretty stimulating conversations. And for me, it's very rewarding to hear people just chime in on what they got out of my book or different tangents that it might have led to, and hearing them tell their own stories about what I'm trying to offer in the book. So hopefully today will be no different. But in that spirit, we're picking up with chapter 3, Archetypes in Modern Storytelling. And Virginia is going to man that operation. Welcome, Virginia Grenier.
Yeah, either way, it is Grenier. I think I know we've talked about that.
So who thought we'd go back to that?
Yeah,
controversy?
yeah. Well, it is a controversy because I'm married to a man who says, "Well, my family's now in America, so we say Grenier, but it is Grenier because it's French."
How does he say Grey Poupon?
He doesn't. He doesn't speak a lick of it.
No, Grey Poupon, the mustard.
Yeah, I know, but he doesn't. He doesn't like that mustard, and he doesn't.
Right.
And he doesn't have any French in him whatsoever.
He can't even speak the word Grey Poupon. Got it.
No, yeah, no. His grandparents and his parents didn't pass it down. Anyways, so we are in chapter 3. It's these you can go back if you don't remember or hadn't listened to the chapter. Nick does an amazing job reading the each chapter of the book. So I do encourage you guys to do that. So to kind of get it going, it's the chapter 3 is going into the archetype in modern storytelling is the name of that episode that we're going to be discussing. It's just Nick and I this time, and I don't want to quite go into asking you a question yet, Nick. I just at the beginning of the chapter, I just want to throw this out there. This is just kind of what was going through my mind. Nick does a exercise that would happen as well when teaching at the art center with his students. And when I was listening to it, it really brought into for me that stage. And later in the chapter, you actually do talk about John Piaget, and child development and how kids, how we go through the developmental life cycle of children. And so what's interesting is, as I was listening to that exercise, I thought about, well, yeah, of course, people, when we're younger, everything feels like an original thought. And then we go into adolescence. It's because it's the first time, right? We're discovering it's that wonder, which is why I think we love animation, which is why I love this book, because it really is, in many ways, where is that child-esque wonder, right? Of being a kid and fighting stuff. And then of course my lovely clinical brain started going into, yeah, and then we reach adolescence, and then, that angst kind of comes in sometimes for us or whatever. However, we also start to go, well, maybe I didn't completely have an original idea. However, I see how these patterns are forming. And then we get into our old age, whatever that is, because I don't believe I'm there yet.
Maturity.
Yeah, it's the maturity years. And then we realize, even though we see these patterns, we see that cylindrical process, metaphors coming back up, archetypes coming back up, even stereotypes. And I know we get into stereotypes later in this chapter as well. You talk a little bit about that too, even though it is focused on archetypes, but how they're that difference. Again, it's with that wisdom, we realize, oh, well, what else is there to learn and discover under it? And so that's kind of where my brain started when I first listened to the beginning of the chapter over again, in my mind. So with that in mind, what I put out to you, Nick, is, do you think that there's a reason archetypes endure?
Well, there's a myriad of reasons, and that's what we're here to talk about. But I'm sure you have your opinion. But academically, there are many reasons that archetypes endure and inform storytelling. But I would argue every aspect of life. But to backpedal a little bit and address some of the things you said, I mentioned Piaget a bit later in the context of, I broaden archetypes to mean innate responses to formal properties. Because again, at Art Center, we talk about not just blood and what it conjures in the psyche, but the color red, right? So we talk about bridge. Well, it doesn't have to be a literal bridge. It can just be an arch, that still carries all the same connotations or denotations. So I talk about Piaget because there's a generalizing function of the brain that means, a child doesn't need to prick his finger on a knife, an icicle, a tooth, a shard of glass to know that angular or sharp shapes represent danger to the psyche. And this is the language we artists are speaking, right? When we design a character and we use shape language. Do I use curvilinear forms or do I, use jagged angular forms? And what does that do for the psyche? I think if anyone wants to look at the the Incredibles, the character designs in that are really, really well thought out, from the color symbology of, blue for the sympathetic characters and the heroic characters, to red as menace, a lot of the archetypal, almost cliche ones. But anyway, that's a great one to look at for character designs, to look at the curvilinear versus the angular. So anyway, that's why I mentioned Piaget a bit later. But I think we could spend the entire episode talking about the basis of archetypes. I think there's a few schools of thought on where they live. Is it nature or nurture or both? And then the difference between archetype to stereotype to cliche. And also, most importantly to me, what's the difference between a trope and, yes, a universal, durable, lasting archetype? A lot of empiricists, it's very fashionable to be empirical these days and say, well, Jung was a quack. There's no, and we'll get into defining some of this stuff, but there's no reservoir called the collective unconscious. It's all learned during our lifetimes through social conditioning. So all the tropes we carry in our little psyches, like you said, it might be revealed later that, oh, that's an existing trope, and now I've seen it a million times at age 50, but I hadn't when I thought I invented it at age 12, right? I think it's very fashionable to say, oh, it's all learned during our lifetime. And I've seen that in my teaching. So let's talk about that a little bit. social conditioning, or call it what you want, socialization. We do inherit a lot of tropes that have been repeated in literature and cinema, but it doesn't mean the resonance isn't based in something that is epigenetic, that's maybe in our cellular DNA or hardwired on our cellular memory. Does that make a little bit of sense?
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, we can
And
parse all that. I just noticed in education, it's less and less fashionable to even talk about archetypes. And I tell my students, like, well, you're an artist, so if you don't get comfortable with it, you're missing out. That's the language we speak as artists. I'm already getting passionate. Sorry.
no, and I'm glad you are. And one of the ones you did get passionate about when we're talking, when you go into the book and start talking about different archetypes, you spend some time with the orphans. And you laugh. And
I don't know. Okay.
yeah, well, you did. You mentioned and it was, and what was interesting is, and you pointed this out in the in as well in the chapter about how, there's always in Disney the character that has the one deceased parent.
Right.
And I was like, that's so interesting that for Nick that orphans stood out for you as an archetype, because I was going, I wonder if that's that Disney influence, because and you did
Mm.
mention the Lion King. Pinocchio was used a lot, so we'll go into Pinocchio in a second, because Pinocchio has a lot of archetypes in it. But yeah, I mean, there's quite a few. I think the most memorable, probably for all of us Gen Xers, is definitely Bambi, especially that
Mm.
opening scene of mommy being shot by the
Mm.
hunter.
Yeah, that
Um,
fucked us all up for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, I think that's pretty
Mm.
much that defines Gen X. I think 100%.
Right. It explains Gen X. Yeah.
Yeah,
We're
there you
still
go.
haunted by Bambi.
Yeah, there's our stereotype. Bambi haunted us. So that's why we're the way we are.
Right.
To stereotype us. But
Well, if
anyway,
you buy that, by the
yeah,
way,
if you
if you
buy that,
buy that we're hard asses, yeah.
yeah, if you buy that stereotype, exactly. So anyhow, so let's go into Pinocchio, and
Well,
because
hold on. You said
okay,
Pinocchio is layered with archetypes, and it
that's true.
is. But
He is.
before, is there a
Go ahead.
dog whining? Sorry. Okay. That,
Yes.
okay.
Yep. That's
Um,
my German Shepherd. Let me go
no
walk.
problem. I just threw a shoe at Bowie because he's nibble. We used to call it nibble notching.
She
Do you,
was locked. She was locked up. Someone let her out.
oh, no worries. But Bowie was chewing, which, some people, what is that disorder where you can't stand the sound of chewing?
Well, I know it's definitely a sensory disorder, but the exact one I do
There
not
is one,
remember.
yeah. And I
Yeah.
don't have it, but I'm developing it thanks to Bowie. But we used to call it nibble notching when they just chew and chew. So I had to throw a shoe at him. So I will forgive the dog. Oh, that's a husky, right?
German Shepherd.
Oh, I heard it. Oh. You,
Yeah, she's she's a mix, but she looks more German Shepherd. She's a German Shepherd Husky mix, but German Shepherds are just as bad.
I thought you had a white husky with blue eyes.
That's my Australian Pyrenees mix.
Oh, no husky in there?
No,
Oh, please. I've seen pictures. Come on.
the Australian Shepherd's the dual colored eyes.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
we'll get to the bottom of that later.
yeah,
Anyway, the orphan archetype.
yeah.
I see why you would say my Disney background inclined me to fixate on that one, but it's more than that. It's a huge archetype and literary device, right? And I went into in the book why it exists. So I would say Little Orphan Annie, has nothing to do with Disney, and if you watch Ma Vie en Rose or anything based on Edith Piaf, she's the quintessential orphan, right? And there are many examples of that archetype.
Mhm.
But in the book, I go into, and it kind of speaks a little bit to the empirical versus the more, I don't know, spiritual notions about archetypes. It says a lot that when I ask my students, and they're young and maybe not given permission to talk in these terms in academia very much, but when I say, why do you suppose that is? Why do you think Disney always includes a missing parent? Their answers were often, oh, because your heart goes out to them, like the
Mm.
dog that's been kicked too much.
Mhm.
So they're not wrong. And it's a wise instinct to say, well, your protagonist has to elicit our empathy or compassion. Not wrong, because you want to invest in their want and their need, and meaning
Yeah.
their goal. So they're
Mhm.
not wrong, but I also then gently say, sure, but that's superficial. And in my opinion, it's a little more like, oh, it keys into that longing, the seeking. I have a book called The Seeker, for God's sake. So when we feel we've been transplanted as sentient beings in the right physical world, when consciousness is metaphysical, we do feel displaced. That's why so many look to the heavens for daddy. And that's kind of how I put it. It creates a longing and a desire for, you name it, fulfillment, tranquility, inner peace, well being, satisfaction, all those things we are all spiritually seeking if we're in touch with it.
Yeah, and I love that. And for me, when you were talking about it, and you did briefly mention Oliver Twist, which was one
Mm.
of the defining books, and even later made into a movie um, during our childhood. That, I mean, I know the book was when we were kids because it's Dickens, but um, I loved that story so much.
Well, even Pippin was
Yeah,
pretty much orphaned and raised by his
yeah,
aunt and uncle, right? I
right.
don't know Oliver
Mhm.
Twist that well, I'll be honest, but I heard you want to
Yeah.
slit your wrists after watching it on stage. You want to
But
jump out a window.
but yeah, but it not only does it have the child wonder of navigating life, right, on your own, but exactly all those things. It's that, hope, it's the desire,
Mm.
it's the longing. It really invokes all of that in you. And I love that you mentioned Pippin too, because same thing, yeah. Love Great Expectations.
I do
Um,
too.
yeah,
Probably for different reasons, but it's a
but
big part of my worldview. Actually, we could
yeah,
get into that one.
yeah, I mean, again, same thing, right? He's not, and I go. So let's talk about a little bit. Let's use Pippin because I've had people who've read Great Expectations, like, well, he's, because of his life circumstances, he's looking for the grass is green, and he thinks it's always greener in this because of this, the older lady, right?
Miss Havisham.
Yeah, and I'm like, but is that really what is going on, or is it he's seeing the possibilities and finding where he belongs within the opportunities that are out there and
Mm.
what his desire is versus the grass is greener on their side, which to me that's going into that stereotype.
Well, so you're saying his innocence is contrasted with how very jaded and cynical Miss Havisham is? He's the
Yeah,
symbol of innocence?
yeah,
Maybe. I mean, the thing that, again, I haven't read it since 1986, high school, but it did rock my world. And it's one of the, I'm not a genre reader. So for good or bad, I've kind of only been exposed to great literature because I don't read much. Like, I'm only exposed to what I was forced to read in school, but it has shaped me, from Wuthering Heights to Great Expectations to The Great Gatsby. But in that one, what I walked away with for a lifetime, being a Scorpio, I love longevity. I love threads that connect over time,
hmm,
interconnectivity, yes, loyalty and all of that stuff. I am a typical Scorpio, but I just love threads that connect. So when you can see things come full circle 30, 40 years later, or you see a seed come to fruition, right? Decades later, you realize time is a construct of man, everything's interconnected. And that's who I am. I'm a communist by nature. All I see all day, every day is interconnectivity. So I really loved that. Yeah, Pippin, was kind to a stranger in his youth, and it paid off 30 years later. And then all his relationships, he never really lost his sense of self or his core essence. And, one definition of sin is straying from the self.
hmm,
So I think his integrity paid off. Am I wrong about all of that? Like, it seemed like it was about, ooh, don't be so sure that everything's a flash in the pan. There's karma.
yeah. No, and you're right, and he did say to his true self, which is what I love about him.
Yeah,
Um,
didn't I list him as a quintessential innocent in the
mhm.
archetype? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you
And
did.
the
Yeah.
orphan. He was.
Yeah.
Did I? Anyway,
Yeah, he's an orphan too, yeah.
they're often
Uh,
hand in hand. The
mhm.
quintessential deer in the headlights orphan that is the symbol of innocence, and one of the major templates is preservation of innocence or return to innocence. Uh, but it often goes hand in hand with the orphan archetype.
Yeah. And they are met with other character arcs that challenge that
Mm-hmm,
throughout the
mm-hmm.
storyline. And I think overall, with the innocent and the orphans, the big thing too is if they do start to go awry a little bit, they, do they come back to who they fully
Mm-hmm.
are, which is interesting. So let's go to Pinocchio, because obviously
Mm.
Pinocchio is not an orphan, he's a puppet. However, again, has that innocence, right? And
Mhm.
does get challenged in many ways. And
Well,
ends up,
we're all blank slates when we arrive here, right? So
yeah,
he's innocent because he's a blank slate, maybe. Yeah, and he's
yeah.
all of us, right?
Yeah, but he does go awry, and
Very well,
and
yeah.
almost loses himself, as we all know,
Right, right,
especially out on that island.
right.
Um, but I love the fact
Well,
when
sorry,
you
go
talk
ahead.
about about him, on the puppet side of things too, and Geppetto and being the puppet master.
Hmm. Yeah, I think in past episodes you kind of blew me away because you seem to know the template really well. And I don't remember where you came into that, but I just repeat things I've heard Marianne Williamson say and some other people that I listen to. And I don't know, I guess I've come into my own opinion about the significance of Pinocchio. I think there's a reason that it's endured and it does speak to the Italian culture. It's culturally relative to some degree. But I don't know. I guess I'll give you my breakdown and then you can chime in because I do remember you blew me away with something you said previously. So to me, it seems like, the obvious is Geppetto is God or the puppet master. And then Pinocchio, his creation, is all of us sort of transplanted here that, yeah, have the will, have the capacity to betray ourselves or return to innocence or all of the above. I stole candy bars in junior high. I wouldn't do it now. We all tested our limits, right? I
Mhm.
smoked pot. I did a lot of things I wouldn't do now. Yeah, pot for my own reasons. I would do shrooms if you had them. But we all test our limits and figure out who we are in the world by doing that. But anyway, more importantly, I guess I still feel like becoming a real boy is really code for building character. And that's what Geppetto wants for his son, but that's what ideally we would want for Pinocchio. And then I've heard speculation that Jiminy Cricket is the Holy Spirit if you're religious, right? Or he's
Mhm.
conscience if you're not. But then I heard actually the Blue Fairy is the Holy Spirit. So if you just look at how all those elements are interacting in the spiritual journey or the human condition, as non religious, non spiritual people like to call it, it's the same thing, right? The hero's journey, the spiritual journey, the human condition. Uh, to me, it's all just different parlance for the same concept. And if you look at all those elements and how they interact, I think it speaks for itself. I had one writing teacher that said, you should know your characters so well that you just put two random characters in a room together. They may never interact in the manuscript, but just you should know what they're going to say to each other. So I think Pinocchio speaks for itself, but if you label all the archetypes as such in the way that I just did, figure out for yourself what it means. What would you add to that in terms of the meaning of Pinocchio, the thematic content?
When I think of the back to and probably I might be even been skewed more from when whatever I said that you found so enlightening from before. However, when I think of, I mean, definitely, he is that blank slate, right? You can always say it's that tabula rasa in counseling where you walk in total blank slate
Mm-hmm.
concept, and so what's going to get written upon you based off who you're sitting across from and holding space for, or allowing the narrative to be written upon you. So um however, he's tied by these strings, right? The strings are what's keeping
Mm,
him from his autonomy, from
mm.
him venturing out.
But
And
if God is, maybe you don't agree that Geppetto is God, who is pulling the strings? Is that destiny or fate or what are we bound to?
well, and that's the if I take it out of the religious context, because I agree, like you could look at Geppetto, and then when the strings are cut, that's when we get,
Mm,
going biblically, that's of course when we get, agency, right, which is
mm,
choice.
Or free will, is that another way
free,
to put it?
yeah, or free will is the other way to put it.
So the strings outside of religious context, maybe the strings are ethics or morals, which have transcended any given religion, but it's definitely a thing in culture.
Yeah, and I was going to say, so that really goes into, like, if you think about and this is, in anthropology, this is in socialism, but you when you look at systems theory, um that's literally how I look at the strings, is that's the system in which he was created under.
So
And then you
norms and mores and codes that
exact
we live by.
right, and now he has and so and if you think about this, this is what we do as adolescents, so going a little bit into the developmental theory, right? We start to test our boundaries. We start
Mm,
and sometimes we break them, so he ends up breaking his strings to gain his own autonomy to go out and venture.
hmm
um yeah, it's interesting with Jiminy Cricket. I agree with and again, going back to, before I go to Jiminy Cricket, back to Geppetto. I mean, yeah, Geppetto is definitely, you could look at him as being the creator, family of origin, um, the original mentor,
mm,
um, to the beginning of Pinocchio. But then when Jiminy Cricket comes, yeah, I definitely believe ultimately, and we know because in the story he says, "Oh, you're going to be his conscience," So we all have put Jiminy Cricket in that. However, at the same time, Jimmy Cricket is that external voice telling him what to do.
mm.
So if you think about that, it's also, do I want to listen to everything you're telling me? Because where's your bias and judgment and prejudice coming in?
Well, okay, but
Yeah,
the true sage kind of defies or transcends all of that. Yeah, I think
yeah.
it's open to interpretation. I was focusing on this earth-shattering idea that the blue fairy is the Holy Spirit, not Jiminy Cricket. But
Well,
I
and that's
guess
what,
we could all define conscience differently. The
yeah,
angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other.
right.
But maybe you really made me think about it in new terms, and I don't know it like the back of my hand. So I'm now thinking that yeah, socialization teaches us theoretical boundaries, right? We can
Hmm.
all be preached to about morals and ethics, and sometimes they're ill founded, right? I don't
Hmm.
agree with every one of our laws. I think prostitution should be legal. I think pot. This came up this morning on my mind about the Nameless Prince, like how quickly it was rendered dated. I wrote it in 2012, and I
Mm.
had the uncle be a drug dealer not because he was immoral, but I just wanted him to not be the best father material. He inherited, his nephew. He was the guardian for his nephew, but he wasn't ready. And I don't know why. I guess I was reconciling it with news stories about the Mayans, the gang in LA, and some of the, interactions with the homeless community that were going on. And I based a lot of it in news stories. So it just seemed appropriate that the uncle be a drug dealer and he's in bed, not with the mafia, but with LAMO, LA Mayan organization, the gang. I don't know why he became a drug dealer, other than it, to me, said he's not quite ready to be a father. Now, pot's legal. It doesn't seem sinister at all. A reader now would go, well, he shouldn't be considered a thug because he deals drugs. It's fine. So even the language the young people use, it's like outdated already. So I don't know. All of that crossed my mind just this morning. So norms and mores shift and change, and they're not
Hmm.
all well founded. Some of our laws are pretty messed up and pretty archaic. So it almost sounds like you are saying that until you test those codes in right through real life experience, they're pretty
Hmm.
fallible. And then maybe we come into true um, integrity or character by testing those boundaries. Is that
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because I mean, think about it with Jiminy Cricket. I mean, he is, I'm not saying that the advice he's trying to give, the direction he's trying to give is bad by any means, but it's based off. I love it. You talked about common sense in this in the chapter as well. And
Did I?
well, no, but this is where I want to go with that. You just briefly mentioned it. You didn't go into deep. conversation. It was just just as you're going over archetypes and tropes and stereotypes, how in nature versus nurture, and there's that common sense aspect that comes into play. So I actually had a client who said this to me once, which really I think is what has skewed me to some degree, and how I look at things. And they said, well, what is common sense? Because it's the
It's
sense
relative.
it's the sense in which you were born.
Mm. Oh, you
And
think? Or the client thinks
that's
that?
what the client said, that
Mm.
it's the sense in which you're born. And when I actually stopped and thought about that, I went, well, it's true, because what's common sense to, and I can say this because I've moved from many states. What was common sense to me in California growing up and
Right.
moving to Utah, I mean, there are some crossovers because it's still culturally the United States. There are some differences where I look at some people and go like, how, why does that make sense to you? Like, duh. Like something's off with that thought process. But for them, being here in Utah, that was, again, going back in that cultural realm, the socialization, it's that makes sense to them. And I'm going,
Mhm.
okay. So you think, and Nick, I mean, you've been in other countries. I mean, how often did you see something that was like logical and would make sense to us here in the US, where you're going, yeah, over there they'd look at you like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, cultural relativity is alive and well, right?
Hmm.
And my best way to react to that is I remember in high school, 1985, it was cool to be Christian, by the way. You were supposed to be done with your pot smoking, and it was cool to be Christian. So one of my Christian friends, I didn't escape it. I went to, UMYF, United Methodist Youth Fellowship. I did all the different denominations of Protestantism. And it wasn't weird to me at all. But anyway, some people took it a little too far, and I won't name any names, but well, just first names. My friend Chris once said, well, we're all built like a car without a stereo. And that stereo is Jesus Christ. Like, there is that thought. You need a book to tell you right from wrong. And you are missing something until you plug in that stereo that is Jesus Christ. And I remember thinking, ooh, the most dangerous thing in life, even at whatever it was, 15, 16, I thought, well, thinking we're all the same is dangerous. I am completely the opposite now. I love the hero's journey. I love the resonance that occurs because of this commonality and universality. And even over time, we evolve pretty slowly. I hear myself say, well, there's a reason Shakespearean templates still resonate, and even the Greek tragedies. Sadly, technology increases exponentially, but we're a little slower to the party, right? We evolve
Oh
pretty
yeah.
slowly. So I love finding the common ground and the universality now. And I'm fascinated by cultural relativity. So I've also heard myself say, maybe later in life, like 30, that well, all the fundamental tenets of all the major religions, if you don't split hairs and parse, are universal. I thought, well, I don't disagree with anything Christ actually said that came out of his mouth hole. I just hate what the early church did to it, and then I demonized institutionalized religion. So, I went out and bought that book called Just Christ. No, Just Jesus. Sorry. You got to do the jazz hands. Just Jesus. And I had this fantasy that, I mean, I love JC and the boys. I think they're awesome. But I thought all the problematic stuff came in with patriarchy, as you were saying, the Judeo-Christian tradition and the early church. And I bought the book and put it on my coffee table. And as I slowly read it, I was like, ooh, there's some problematic stuff in there. Christ wasn't above any of it. Ego or some of the messed up things that were very tribal at the time. So I don't know where I'm going with this other than I think there's a reason ethics is a branch of philosophy. It's never gone away despite religions, despite, regional or time specific norms and mores and codes, because they can be way ill founded. But I do think we have ethics. Now, I vacillated over my lifetime in whether it's the hand that rocks the cradle, or meaning they're taught, or whether we have an inborn sense of ethics. That we could talk about that till the cows come home. But I generally think if your mama raised you right, you're good. I just worship my mother and thank God she taught me right. But do you believe we have an internal compass? Or do you believe it's all taught by the mother or by society or all of the above?
Um, it's all the above, and I think that's been more solidified in my brain as I've gotten into narrative. And I know we've talked about narrative therapy before, but kind of always have always looked at that in general, just from being a writer too.
Whether we know right from wrong?
The fact if we have an innate
Mhm.
internal compass, or is it all so that nature versus nurture conversation, or is it all socialization through the things we're told, right?
Right, right.
And learned and watched, and therefore is modeled in front of us, and that's how we make meaning. Um,
Mm.
so going, and I love what you said. So I'm going to go back to the blue fairy for a second. So when you mentioned that universal concept, and that to me, taking the blue fairy in a whole nother direction versus saying that's like the Holy Spirit, which to me is, again, I think that's a religious way of saying that's your internal compass based off your beliefs, value systems, which
Or it's our line to the,
yeah,
it's our line to divinity. It's our
or so,
line
yeah,
to things that
yeah,
defy. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, or yeah, and or it can be, or it could be that, or both.
Conduit. I think of
Yeah,
the Holy Spirit as a conduit to divinity, to God.
right.
Yeah.
And so if you look at the blue fairy in that way, I absolutely agree with you. I feel like she was more representation of the universal. And when I say universal, I mean the universal truths.
Hmm.
And when I go to that, I mean, we can I all agree murdering somebody isn't okay.
At a dinner, you wouldn't brag about it at a dinner party, that's for sure.
So like there,
Frowned upon.
and so that's how I think, like when I think of like Jimmy Cricket, I put him kind of in that mentor category of a character, when you're talking about writing, right? That you
Mhm.
got your mentors, which is where you'd have like Gandalf. You mentioned the Oracle, which I love. You're like, and they didn't even try to expand very far on like who she was. Like, no originality. She was just the Oracle.
Well,
you know, but however, I think that we need to have those people because they're the ones who sit. Yeah, I mean, basically, you could say that's, again, sitting in the counseling chair. That's what they do, right? They present things in front of you, they mirror, they reflect back to you, like, this is what I just heard you say, and here's this other thing that you didn't consider, and both
mm,
truths can be true at once or maybe not. And so they present that in front of you. So that's what I feel like Jimmy Cricket was doing at the same time.
mm,
um
mm.
where with the blue fairy, or when you go
Oh,
into more
it's
those conduits, it's that they're actually like, I'm letting you,
indisputable. It's
yeah, you can't, we all know that we all can agree upon this truth here.
yes, you might be right, actually, that he's one of many forces in our emotional and spiritual maturation. But the ultimate truth is the blue fairy. I like that.
Yeah.
I do want to quickly say we're talking about morality a lot and ethics a lot.
Hmm.
I do think largely that's what storytelling does. It teaches us to live in the world. And if you trace, the history of storytelling, it was largely how we imparted not just the metaphysical or the noosphere, the metaphysical values of culture, but yes, there's, early liturgy was about imparting very, moralistic concepts. So storytelling is almost inextricable from ethics and morals, if that makes sense, because it's always taught us how to live in the world, whether it's through mythology or religion. But there's so much more to it. It's just about nowadays reflecting back the human condition, and what we do with that is still up to us, and it's still an ongoing story, right? That we're all characters in, individually and collectively, so micro and macro. So I don't want to limit it to morality. It's getting a
Yeah.
little moral here.
Yeah, no. Well,
but
but I wanted to go to the mother figure because I know the mother
oh,
figure is a major character that you've talked about in multiple podcast episodes.
well, I've joked like I keep telling the same story. I clearly have abandonment issues myself. Speaking of the missing parent, because yeah, the nameless prince was basically regurgitated in the Seeker for sure, in the missing mother archetype.
Hmm.
So what do you want to talk about?
Well, so because you've talked about the mother figure and how important the mother figure can be as an archetype and what she helps us understand as well when we're on, any journey that we're on.
Well, Andrea should probably come back on, but I think she did talk about the different archetypes of mother, right? There's so many,
Hmm.
but one of them eats her children. You know, I was very lucky that I had the quintessential mother archetype, the nurturing mother. And so it says more about my twisted psyche than anything universal. But in The Seeker, I consciously used not just that missing parent archetype that makes you want to seek and find out our metaphysical place in the world, but more so, it became a code for divinity. So she was a goddess, he was a demigod, unaware of his divine heritage. So I kind of used it that way. She's missing in action, meaning we play hide and seek with God. That's a Howard Jones reference from the 80s. Remember this
Hmm.
that great song? I what's it called?
Not sure
There
which one.
was a time when there was nothing at all. Howard Jones.
Yeah,
Love the song, can't think of the name.
I
But
can't
he
either.
yeah, he's said we play hide and seek with God, and I've really carried that with me. I think I've written about how we would be blinded if we saw divinity all day, every day. We can't handle it. So we see glimpses, and that sustains us during our toil, you know? So that's why I included the missing mother. I'm trying to remember, but in the Nameless Prince, it was more partially the longing, and it wasn't code for divinity at that point, but it was the mysteries of the past, and there was supposed to be rage servicing in Seth. Because he was finally seeing through the facade. You know, people tried to hide things from him, but children are very intuitive. So I just wanted it to be about the rage that surfaces, and then what do you do with that? So that story was about overcoming disillusionment. And then all these years later, The Seeker was partially about overcoming futility. Because when you get old enough, you just throw your hands in the air. Anyway, so I think they served, that same template served different functions on those two books. But I did at one point go, did I just retell the same story? Should I lie down on the couch with Virginia? Dear Lord.
Well, what I love about the mother archetype too, so I'm going to take it into a couple of different directions. So the first one I'm going to bring up, so kind of going over, what the mother archetype can represent. So going out into paganism, right? You've got the three goddesses. You have the maiden. Oh my gosh, I know the last one's a crone. Oh my gosh, I can't remember the third one.
Mm,
Oh, it's just sorry guys, it totally just slipped my mind. Because I don't think it's maiden mother crone. Maybe it is, and maybe that's why it's like slipping my
mm,
mind.
mm-hmm.
Anyhow, so the maiden is that again is that fertility, innocence, beauty. Then you get into the second stage. I'm just gonna say the mother. If I'm wrong, shoot me later. You guys can all send me bad emails later about it. But that's where she becomes a mom. So it's that nurturing, it's the caregiver, it's the taking care of, and then you go into the crone, which is the wisdom, the healer,
Mm-hmm.
and then the cycle returns, which is also represents the phases of the moon. Um, and some, I must say, all pagan, but in quite a few of them. So, anyways, so I love that arc of when you look at a mother in that concept of
Beautiful,
the
beautiful.
three phases of you know feminism as in womanhood.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but
That all, I
then
mean, even if you didn't pick the right word, those sound
yeah,
accurate. That sounds about right to me.
yeah. However, then I think of like going back to that nurturing side, you have like mothers like in Hamlet.
Mm-hmm.
Or gosh, what's another or you think of stepmothers, right? Where they're like
Right, right,
where they you think they're gonna be nurturing and there's that presentation like, oh yes, I'm gonna come and I love you, honey, and I'm gonna take, we see that in a lot of the Disney princesses movies, right? That have the stepmoms and
right.
they'll become the wicked stepmothers.
Well,
Um,
Sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah, go
Marianne
ahead.
Williamson says it beautifully, and I think I've quoted her on here before, but she says, the stepmother archetype is the ego. The ego promises to protect you and care for you and nurture you and love you and did I say protect you? But it's a false promise.
Yeah. And if you think about it, it's because we're all fallible.
Mm.
And so maybe it is a want or a genuine promise, and they fall short of it, could be. But I think about, like, even in like the counseling office with when people come in and talk about the relationships with their moms and who mom is. um there is that caring, nurturing side, and what really comes up for me is sometimes I wonder if maybe that mother archetype helps us understand attachment, since we're in her womb, we
Hmm.
come
Hmm.
out of her womb, she is the first heartbeat, voice, presence we're aware of, right? So it's that attachment. And then if she's absent, if she's avoidant, not present, how does that affect our attachment and our relationships with other people?
Just forever. In a word, forever. That's all.
Yeah, so it makes sense why that mother archetype in storytelling, in life, becomes an interesting symbol,
Well,
really.
it's everything. I mean, you
Mhm.
remember that Andrea said it is your first relationship. And I thought
Yeah.
she was talking about differentiating, but you literally don't even realize you're a separate organism or psyche from your mother. That's a differentiation right there. And she corrected me and said, well, we have all kinds of separation and differentiation throughout life. But I think it's everything. And I will say, as much as I put my mom on a pedestal, I truly think I hit the lottery. Like she was everything you would want a mother to be. She wasn't the neglecting mother or the one that'll eat your children. And I have another friend, again, no naming of names, but everything he writes is like, holy crap, what? Where did his mother drop the ball? He has such a negative, frankly, what's it called? Like misogynistic view of women that I
Yeah.
just wasn't exposed to. But it said so much about him. So I will go to my grave saying I struck the lottery, hit the lottery. But I also know I had to put her on a pedestal because my dad was an alcoholic. So I needed a good character in that story, you know? And then
Yeah.
years later, when I realized, well, that's not even realistic. She's faulted. She's human. That's silly. And then I was mad at her for 10 years for not protecting me, from the alcoholism and all of that. So the bottom line is, I think the older you get, the more it's water under the bridge. And then when there's so little time left, right? You don't want to blame anybody, right? That comes with, I think, emotional maturation and spiritual evolution is we're all doing the best we can, right? And
Mhm.
all that matters is the moment and transforming the moment. And everything else is water under the bridge, as I said. What do you think of that? I mean, maybe
Yeah.
you didn't have any complaints about your parents, but I think your 20s are kind of about figuring out what makes you tick and diagnosing and, yeah, blaming. Then we maybe grow out of that.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to that fact, which is why I talked about the three phases of womanhood. Is
Mm,
we forget that fallible piece, because you're right, we have that symbiotic relationship with mom,
mm.
and so we it's hard to see her any other way, right? so so having flaws is not one of them,
Yeah,
or do we take them well?
right.
Yeah.
Well, I do think it's, again, we should have Andrea back on because this is not,
Yeah.
I have no business chiming in, but I do feel, that patriarchy is on its way out. We're not, balance would be the goal, right, in
Mhm.
society. And if we have all the archetypes inside of us, sorry, but men have a nurturing aspect. It just looks different. It takes the form of protecting the family unit or sometimes being a warrior, but actually being a protector. So you name the quality inherent in the human condition, and I'll show you the male version and the female version. But I do think obviously patriarchy hasn't worked for hundreds of years, and we're ushering it out toward balance, not
Yeah.
toward everybody being henpecked or losing their like all of this is a backlash, right? When you talk about toxic masculinity and all these crazy things that I don't know, just demonstrate that men are terrified and they're digging in their heels and trying to preserve some fantasy about masculinity. Clearly, it's a last ditch effort in the face of what's called evolution.
Yeah, and speaking of that, because I know you talk a lot, not a lot, but you do bring him up because he's definitely a character in history that has talked a lot about archetypes, which is Carl Jung, and in Jungian philosophy is definitely out there, alive and well. And I love that you just brought up the protector, the warrior, and the critic, because there's a modality out there that bridges off of that called internal family systems, talking about how we have these inner archetypes within ourselves.
Mhm.
Um,
All of us have all the archetypes.
I mean, we might name them different things. So to pick on the Matrix, who didn't have original, I never thought about that, by the way, until like I going back listening to the chapter, I started chuckling. I was like, you know what? I never thought about it watching that movie, and I'm going, but you're so right. They did not get they did not get original because
I was
you
being a little facetious, but yeah, I was being facetious that they didn't even bother giving her a name. She's just the Oracle. You know,
well,
might as well name her the Voice of Wisdom.
yeah, well, it's like the architect, which is where I was going to go
Right, right,
next.
right.
I mean, so how do you see that archetype, the architect, um, when it comes to looking at the meaning of that particular role?
Well, again, the seeker, you know, I employed the quintessential architect, which is Daedalus. So I spent a lot of time, you know, developing Daedalus. And I think the God archetype and the architect and the mad scientist, they can all go hand in hand. And maybe what if they all exist inside of us, they are in varying degrees, and sometimes they're dueling aspects of our psyches, right? So whenever I hear like an Enneagram, what do you call it, Enneagram profile, or you're type A, you're type B, I always think, okay, well, we're all human, and I don't like categorizing. I think if you can find all of it in all of us, it's just about, you know, what do I want to nurture in myself, or what's the ratio? And everything's a gamut anyway, right? So with Daedalus, I guess I think it breaks down, and I do have the book in front of me, but I'm not going to take our time to open it. But I know there's all these subcategories that you know, subsequent Jungian psychologists have added to the main categories. So I think there's the disillusioning God. That's the one that sticks out for me. Like the archetype, the inventor or architect archetype is sometimes the God archetype, and sometimes it is disillusioning, right? When you meet up with God in the form of the Great Oz, it's pretty just disappointing, right? And so that's the one in science fiction that I am fascinated by. When you do come face to face with God, is God just out to propagate? Right? Is he chewing us and spitting us out for the continuity of consciousness? Right? Or does he love us? Huge disparity there. When it comes, I don't know if I'm off topic, but with animals, it's fascinating. Is it love, or do they just want treats? Like, what is at the core of the universe? What is intelligence? What is collective intelligence? Some people believe there's love at the core of everything. Other people think it's dog eat dog, and they've adopted that Darwinian thing about what was meant to be survival of the most adaptable, but has become competition, survival of the most, what is it? Survival of the fittest. I
Yeah.
think life is I don't know, I'm off topic. Life is a Rorschach test. Everything is what you make it. Bye bye.
Okay.
See ya.
Well, so here's something that and it was interesting going back and re-listening to the chapter, and it popped into my head, and even heard you right now. I was like, yep, it's still circulating in my brain. Is when we come across that architect um archetype, yeah, I can see that those questions come in, but then I'm going, if you do become disillusioned, then what happens? Then we need to fill in, right? That void,
Mhm.
to fill in that disillusionment. So then I'm like,
Through
was that,
rationalization
well,
or
I'm like, is
better
that maybe,
examples, maybe?
well, I'm going, is that maybe where where progressivism starts to pop back in? Where we're looking for that opportunity, that growth. And so
Explain that a little more. Progressivism.
Yeah, we're progress, so growth starts, so we want to fill it in. So we
Mm-hmm.
go through that growth cycle, which allows us to become progressive, which moves us toward progressivism, moves us toward
Okay,
thinking somewhere else.
I don't always know what you're prompting me to say. I hope I deliver, especially if it comes from the book. But it's coming back to me. If, the rage comes out in Seth, so there's something to address. The counselors at school, if nobody else, are like, this kid needs to address his issues. When the truth comes out about, again, it has to do with, yeah, his mom, literally like the Moses archetype, putting him in a basket in the LA wash and then leaving the planet. Um, but when he gets to the bottom of that rage, actually what gets him past the disillusionment is forgiveness. That was the key, right, in the interior realm. It's all symbology, and there's a riddle thing, and it's, oh, okay, it's forgiveness. But some people need to forgive the world for disappointing them. So you're not wrong. It's the beginning. I guess progressivism is a word I wasn't familiar with, but it is the beginning of growth and transformation. You got to have something to address to grow, as we talk about every week on this podcast, right? So maybe, anyway, in that case, it turned out to be forgiveness. If the rage surfaces, you're disillusioned, you can diagnose it and identify it. It's usually forgiveness. Does that
Which
resonate at all? Or
Yeah, which goes back to that question of what you said. Some people think, love's at this and everything. Some people
mm,
think, is it survival of the fittest, forgiveness? It's which makes me, go back to which honestly, and I don't know, see if this sits with you. When I think of archetypes, it's the meaning that we assign to those archetypes as we learn how we're relating to them.
yeah, well, I guess in the book I talk about how highly emotional experiences are what get mapped on our worldview or our value system for survival, so that future generations don't have to get bitten by a snake. They see a certain shape and they know to walk the other way, right? Or they see certain color and they know to walk the other way. It's not hard and fast, but it's pretty helpful. And then we add to that database with our own personal experiences, and then we're the only organism that can add to that database with implanted ideas from socialization or ill-founded gossip, right? We can listen and vicariously adopt other people's opinions, and it happens all day, every day. Just look at our politics. Anyway, if that's all true, I do think I'm not an empiricist by any means, but everything is for our propagation and our survival, frankly. And so if we're mapping all these values all day, every day based on highly emotional experiences, that just speaks to how powerful storytelling is in shaping those values. I don't know where I'm going with this, but I guess I'll tell a story. Maybe that'll help me out of this. I recently had, kids run up to Bowie all the time, and either the parents try to, find it a teachable moment and say, you don't just run up to a dog, you got to respect them. But depending on the neighborhood, the ratio of parents that do their job and the ones that don't astound me. And so when they don't, I think, oh, what's that? Um, so I thought, well, my siblings and I, straight out the gate, seem to have respect for animals. And was it taught, or is it just our core nature? And then I thought, nah, it couldn't be true. My parents must have taught us to respect animals, because how is that? How does that contribute to survival? That is not a good instinct to run right up to a pit bull.
Yeah.
And somebody explained to me, and you're in the field, you can tell me if it's true or not, but the curiosity instinct trumps the self-preservation instinct. And I thought, oh, I'm down with that. I love that, because it's what you just said earlier in this episode, that we start out intellectually curious and then we learn all the all the ways to package the variety and the novelty and all the dendrite movement that life has to offer. We learn what category to put it in. We learn what to avoid, right? We learn the rules.
Mhm.
And we have to relearn intellectual curiosity later in life.
Yeah. I totally agree with that.
So it
Again,
was redeeming to me. Sorry, it was redeeming to me to think of it that way. Oh, well, children will risk getting bitten by a pit bull just because curiosity is innate in the human condition. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's when we lose curiosity that we stagnate
Mm.
in many ways.
And begin
Um,
to die.
eh,
What's the extreme of that?
or if you think about it, when curiosity, so to bridge us into the other two topics that do come from the chapter is when we lose the curiosity. I think with the archetypes, it's that reflective part, right? When we have archetypes put in front of us, it causes that curiosity. It causes us to question and wonder. Where when we stop having that, we just take it at face value
Mhm.
and lose that curiosity and just go with, well, this is what I was told. Then what happens? We fall into tropes and stereotypes.
Yeah, but Renee asked a similar question on one of our episodes, and she said, "Well, something like that. What if I stop not just being intellectually curious, but what if I stop my cycles, which are just opportunities for growth,
Mm-hmm.
right? All of our cycles, even if we're learning the same lesson over and over again, crisis is opportunity." And she goes, "Well, what if I just stopped?" And I said, "I don't know. You tell me. What did you come to?" And I don't know. Neither of us could think of anything other than you begin to die. So am I being dramatic?
No, I mean, and of course, you can go in that philosophical, like, what do you mean by saying death? I mean, is it a conscious death? Is it a physical death? Is it both? I mean, who knows? I mean, but yeah, I mean, you stagnate when we stagnate. So there's,
Stagnate. Well, but
yeah,
then health will follow. I just my little personal.
yeah, and you're not, and there's truth to that. Because I mean, you think about there's a difference between I'm gonna use the golden era years. You got the older person, whatever gender they are, sitting out there on the rocking chair, and if that's all they do every day, gonna pick on up a little bit. You got Carl, right? And he's out there, he's out there in his rocking chair, and he's set like all this stuff's being built around my house and I'm mad and I can't make a change. And so he stagnates. He doesn't see opportunity, he doesn't see growth. He just sees it just is, and therefore gets harder and harder, right? And
Mhm.
he's got his walker and he can't move around as much. And then, you have Russell who shows up, who brings in that innocence and that wonder back into his life. And so, Carl, by the end of the movie, is Carl using his walker, by the way, everybody? No, his walker's gone. Why? Because he's growing and he's changing. And so I think that's what happened, because he gets that wonder and curiosity. So yeah, I think stagnation does put us into, you know, Carl saw everybody was out to get him, right? Like all these young whippersnappers, they just don't understand, they don't have that wisdom. Where I think when we always approach things with that curiosity, that wanting to understand, basically I always say, like, turning that kaleidoscope to see the new patterns that
Mhm.
emerge. Because that's one thing I think, going to the human psyche and our nervous system, that helps give us those signals of cues of safety,
Mhm.
is we look for pattern recognition. And if we see the same pattern recognition over and over again, it's very easy for us to get into that cycle of, well, this is just it, what else is there? And then we get hopeless.
Yes. Well, I talk about entropy too. If I do a Nameless Prince 3, the first one was about overcoming disillusionment. Second one was about overcoming futility. But what about entropy? Just we get tired. The
Yeah.
forces begin to weigh on us in every way with life. And who knows? We're not meant to live forever. But I think what we're saying is, and it's a big premise of the book, that the evolution of our noosphere, meaning the invisible realm of our ideas collectively, is as important as the evolution of our biology. We would have become extinct a long time ago if our thought forms didn't evolve. So maybe on the individual level, it's been said a lot lately that stress equals inflammation, inflammation equals disease. Um, Disease doesn't always equal death, but quite often, if
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 it
not,
goes unchecked.
yeah, exactly. And so it's just called the mind body spirit connection. We all know if we don't, it's a vicious cycle. If we don't get exercise, our thoughts follow and we fall into depression. Or if we fall into depression, then we're not as likely to get out and get that novelty or, a change of scenery. There's so many ways to put it. But I think, our episodes always do come back to love, right? And then they always come back to just mind, body, spirit. Balance. Balance is the key, folks. Anyway, I want to say this, like we're going off into some interesting areas. And even if they don't correlate with ideas in the book, we already did that episode. Like, I don't need to reread the book. So I kind of like some of the implications that we're now exploring. I love the new territory we've gotten into.
Yeah, well, and I mean, we've always talked about too when we do these roundtables. We don't want to just rehash what's in the book because, exactly, you said, go listen to that chapter. We've got that episode out there.
Right. It is interesting though how these conversations, new themes do develop, and on second listen, you're like, oh my god, it was depending on what's going on in our lives, they seem to develop themes. So I'm going to take one thread and we can bring this to a close very soon. But just something that's been on my radar, I talked about that kid approaching Bowie and thinking that doesn't serve survival, that's the opposite, because Bowie's thank god he's a nice pit bull, right? But I loved hearing that intellectual curiosity or simple curiosity does trump self-preservation, and maybe that curiosity is what we need to I don't know, maintain in life. You look at Jane Fonda's My Goddess, so I think of her constantly reinventing herself. And there's a lot of older, Cher, not that she's the epitome of intellectual curiosity, but she does reinvent herself. I think she stays fresh. So when we look at examples of people that maintain a quality of life, not that we're meant to live forever, but they maintain a quality of life, it's often just they value that novelty. They value intellectual curiosity and reinvention. So they're more likely to take those spiritual opportunities in the form of a crisis, for example, and yes, make meaning out of it to bring back logotherapy and all that. Anyway, so the thing that's been on my mind lately is, and I think it came up today in a million ways, and this is the thread for me. I am an artist. I'm also a very linear, logical dude, and I was raised that way. So there were many decades where people had to, especially women, maybe they're the keepers of this, I don't know. But the women in my life were frustrated by how very linear I was and logical. And they would introduce chaos just to test me. I'm speculating here, but the crazy women in my life were like annoyed by my linear masculinity, and they would often just try to introduce chaos. And thank God for that. And what comes with it? Well, poetry, the nonlinear, the absurd, all the richness in life, right? And so if you buy any of that, I know they're possibly stereotypes, but maybe archetypes. For me, then when I did become less linear, the staunch empiricists in my life appeared. The roommates that would leave out, popular science on the coffee table because I was so wacky to them. And so it was always men in my life that seemed to be annoyed by the meaning making that artists dwell in, right? And so I just this morning came to this opinion that yes, you can't send rockets into space or build bridges unless you can reel in your dot connecting, your meaning making, the figurative in life. So archetypes are figurative, largely. Storytelling is full of figurative language, not literal language. Sorry if I'm all over the place, but I saw a little meme on Insta the other day, not a meme, but a video about, I think it was Meryl Streep talking about a role she played. Oh no, it was a clip from a role that she played. And she's like, well, it happened. They put the word literal in the dictionary as misused. So people nowadays go, oh my God, literally. Oh my God, I jumped out a window literally. So people have a loose and fast relationship with figurative versus literal. Does that make sense, Virginia?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I fully agree.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think we should retain the meaning of the word literally. But my point is, for many decades now, I've valued the figurative in life. So yes, I'm sure I hyperbolize. Oh my God, it exploded with the power of a million suns. And somebody else, I had an editor go, did it really? Like, did it really 1,000,000 signs? And I had to explain, well, I thought my voice was more mature than that you wouldn't question whether it was literal or figurative. Point is, I just know some men in my life, and they've given me articles to read and they've sent me to podcasts because I'm too wacky for them. But isn't some of the richness in life lost when you stop seeing archetypes? You stop making connections. You stop connecting dots. You stop meaning making, right? In that logotherapy sense. What's left? I think politics, for example, when you get into rhetorical territory, it's very dangerous and there's a lot of responsibility there. So I'm of the mindset, if I need to build a bridge or send a rocket into space, I'm going to adhere to empiricism. The rest of it, which is known as life, is only rich when we see the figurative nature, right, of a metaphor. I'm just a proponent of living life and dwelling in the realm of the figurative. Is any of that resonating for you?
Yeah, when I hear that, what comes up for me is when we focus on the literal, like this is literally a door, you know, and you open and you close and you walk through it, and so it has function.
Mm-hmm.
We lose the perspective if we don't look at figuratively, like, well, it's a door, but it's a doorway to many pathways.
Right.
There's choice, and so I'm using the door
Right.
because.
It's a great example.
Mhm. Because if we just look at like, yeah, this is how I get into that room and leave that room,
Mm-hmm.
we're like, that's my only choices. If you go, wait, I open this door and there's all these other rooms and there's all these other hallways,
Right.
then all of a sudden it becomes this opportunity. I was
For
looking
growth.
for growth. Yeah. So we become
Thank you.
opportunistic versus shut down.
I love it. It's so funny you would use the door example because the way it occurred to me this morning on a potty walk, of course, was exactly that. I was listening to this episode, to the reading of chapter 3 in preparation for this episode, and I was thinking about the bridge in that in that exercise. And I thought we most of the students came up with things like connection, agreement, contract, uh, passage, all the obvious things. But I thought we use it in everyday language, in the vernacular, even colloquialisms and expressions will say, well, I build bridges, and then that implies, well, a mental comportment, is that French or English? Like a mental mindset is thought of as, oh, we were in different places. When we had a relationship, we were just in different places. And then the bridge is, how do you connect one geographic area to the next? So I love that you used the door example because life is just full of opportunities to learn and grow if you see the symbolism. If you choose to see that bird as a harbinger of death, or whatever the Native Americans said about the wild turkey in Tehachapi, I put that in my mom's, and what do you call it? I did a tribute to her at her services. And yes, a wild turkey appeared right after she passed. And lo and behold, not just Native American tradition, but the tribe right there in Tehachapi said it's there to take her, across that border. So I don't know. I just think life would be less rich if we didn't acknowledge the figurative, but also, yeah, like you're saying, maybe we would miss out on learning opportunities or opportunities for growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to what you're saying as well, I mean, which is again part of the essence of our podcast here on Language of the Soul, is when we don't allow ourselves to be curious and we don't look at things in that figurative sense and we go into the literal mindset, right? And
Mm.
we just go with literal definitions using that bridge. We're not building those bridges. We start to see that divide and that diversity happen, and we see the Grand Canyon instead.
You know what? And it's occurring to me right now. It's called imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we need more imagination societally to get us out of this mess. We need more imagination. Is this a good place to end it on?
I think so.
How long have we been going?
Almost an hour and a half.
Okay, I think we're good, but I'm so tempted. Like maybe another episode we'll talk about the heated rivalry thing that I sent you. I know you didn't have time to look at it, but the aspirational storytelling that's become the norm.
Yeah.
A lot of people are saying heated rivalry is almost healing because they set up situations and then lo and behold, the worst possible outcome that you're imagining never comes to pass. It's always the empowering one. And so aspirational, which I've talked about a lot, seems to be a trend. And I hope it keeps up, because if storytelling is what evolves even our politics and our codes, then we need to be telling these aspirational stories. That'll be another episode.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you. Thanks for finding the time. I know you're incredibly busy, but it was good for me.
Oh, I've missed being here with you. I've missed our audience that listens to us, and hopefully they'll keep sharing our podcast, because it's been nice seeing that grow too.
Well, let's keep it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And to our listeners, remember, life is story, and we can get our hands in the clay. Individually and collectively, we can tell a new story. See you next time.
We want to take a moment to thank our wonderful listeners and supporters. Your continued support and sharing of our podcast helps us spread the transformative power of storytelling. If you enjoy our episodes, please rate and review us on your favorite platform and share the podcast with friends and family. For more enriching conversations and insights, subscribe to Language of the Soul podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow us on social media and visit our Patreon website for the latest updates and exclusive content. Your support helps us continue to bring these important stories to life. If you'd like to support us further, consider joining our Patreon community for exclusive content and donation options. Every bit of support helps us reach more hearts and minds.